You know, I love making videos about this subject because it's so easy to make them look so stupid. You know, I get a kick out of it. And of course, when people's eyes become opened through this commonsensical reasoning, it means since you know then there's a God, look for him. Right? That's why I like to talk about these things also. So which parts of the molecules that makes up a bacteria or bacterium, which parts of those molecules gives rise to the bacterium's knowledge of what food it ought to eat to preserve itself alive? The molecules just sit there. They don't do anything. Okay, so there is no self-assembling of molecules, just as much as there's no self-assembling of the molecules of a car to make it a car, right? But suppose the molecules could self-assemble. Okay, they self-assemble. Which part of the molecules, which molecular structure gives rise to intuition? What is it? The proteins mixing with some nucleic acids? Is it the nucleic acids mixing with some fat, some sugars? And when these things come together, it gives rise to an intuition that you should go and look for food to eat. And not only go and look for food to eat, but this is the food you should eat. And then when it eats that food, it also has a molecular structure to metabolize that food, to give the creature the energy it needs. This is fantasy, people. It's fantasy. Now the DNA, people forget. The DNA has to have knowledge of not only individual amino acids, but also has to have knowledge of water and the properties of water and what water does when it touches proteins. So when you have protein there, just like that in water, it doesn't denature the protein. Denaturing of protein happens when there's too much heat, but it does break down the protein. Water does. Water hydrolyzes everything. So in the cell, you don't have water. In the cell, you have a gel-like substance, which is fluid enough to cause the molecules of the proteins, of the amino acids, to fold to form the protein structure that's needed for it to perform its function. But we say it's water to keep it simple, right? Okay, well, DNA has to have knowledge of each amino acid, each of the 20 amino acids used in life. The DNA only utilizes the 20 the specific 20 amino acids utilized in life. Those 20 amino acids have chemical compositions, chemical characteristics. Each of the 20 amino acids. Now, each of these 20 amino acids, when they come in connection with another amino acid, would also form a different chemical structure. When you do this with all the hundreds of different amino acids that would need to be combined to make just one protein, the DNA would have to have knowledge of each of those properties as well as the properties of them when they are combined together. But it will also need to have knowledge of how water affects this molecule that we now have, this string of amino acids that's going to make a protein. Why would DNA need to have knowledge of this? Because because in order for the protein or the amino acids, the string of amino acids, to fold into the correct shape, they would need to be assembled correctly from the beginning of their assembly, so that after they are assembled correctly, remember, hundreds of amino acids long, so that after they are assembled correctly, now when they come in contact with water, because of how water interacts with each of the amino acids would react with that water, with the water molecules, and form a specific shape. And that shape would be there, that shape. Now another string of amino acids would need to be formed, and that one's reaction with water would take a particular shape, and then another long strand of amino acids would form, and they would react with water, and they would take a particular shape. Now, these three amino acids will come together to form a molecular machine. Now, molecular machines are made up of more parts than that, but I'm keeping it simple, right? So these three structures is more than that, but let's just say these three structures come together, and because they are shaped correctly, they fit into each one's proper space, into each one's perspective places, like a puzzle piece, right? So that the machine would form. But this is all being done because the DNA is saying that this is how it should be done, so that when it reacts with water, it will form this shape, so that when it reacts with this shape, it will form a molecular machine. This is how complex the DNA is, and that's why the thing that oversees what's being done is always more complex than that which is being done. The proteins, the molecular machines that formulate proteins are more complex than the proteins that they are formulating, even though the proteins themselves are ridiculously and immensely complex. Okay, even humans can't understand the dimensions of one protein. That's how complex a protein is. But the DNA has all of this. Not only does it have the chemical property, the understanding of the chemical properties of each of the 20 amino acids, but it knows what is going to happen to them when they come together, because it itself is doing this in the cell. And it knows what water is going to do to it once it's formed. It needs to know this. Otherwise, you would not be alive. And it's doing this every single second of every day of your life. It's creating trillions of these protein molecules. So forget about where the information came from, because obviously it came from God. But where did they get knowledge of the properties of water and amino acids? This is something that's based off of nucleic acids and sugars, sugar phosphate and all of that. But it has nothing to do with amino acids. It has nothing to do with water and the properties of water and the molecules of water. But here it is, this thing knows all the knowledge that it needs to have of amino acids, and what would happen to amino acid when it combines with another amino acids, and what would happen when it comes in contact with water. It would need to have all these things already in place so that it can make the machines that it needs to make to keep itself alive, because the DNA is constantly being degraded. So it needs proteins to keep itself in shape at all times. It's like the more you know, the more you realize that this thing, evolution, is a joke. It's a joke. I don't even know if I've explained it correctly, like not correctly, if I've explained it well enough for you to get what I'm trying to say. You know, and obviously I'm speeding over many things, but because I want to keep this under 10 minutes. People. Oh man. Yeah, let me end it here. Peace. Back when they thought that the universe was eternal, a guy named Mr. Hubble, whom the Hubble telescope is named after, would study the universe, and with his telescope he saw that there's a lot of science behind it. Let me not get into that, right? But he noticed that the universe was expanding because of the red lights that he would see. Around that same time, a fella by the name of Einstein from across the waters also came to the same conclusion, that the universe is expanding. However, Einstein didn't want to accept that because he knew what that implied, that if the universe is expanding, then at one point it was closed in upon itself, and so therefore the universe could not have been eternal. So he came up with something that would kind of like make him feel better. So he invented something to say that no, the universe is not expanding. Then Mr. Hubble invited Einstein over to check through the Hubble telescope and see for himself. And they realized that, yeah, the universe is expanding. So he confessed with this quote that the universe, I must confess that it is expanding. So now it's confirmed that yes, the universe is expanding, and that at one point it was nothing. And so how could something come from nothing? So there are lots of theories on how this could have come about, but this is where the notion of the Big Bang came from. But the Big Bang itself came from nothing. So what is the nothing that the Big Bang came out of? Again, there are many theories on this, but the point is that the universe is expanding. Not coincidentally, the Bible addresses this multiple times, and it says that the universe is expanding and that God stretches out the universe like a fine gauze. It also says that he stretches out the heavens like a curtain. It also says that he expands the universe with his hands, like within the span of his hands. There are multiple scriptures where it speaks of the universe expanding. Now, how did shepherds notice this? But it took someone with the brain of Hubble and Einstein to discover this thousands of years later. Well, because the one who created the universe, the one who's expanding the heavens, is the one who inspired those shepherds to record it in his book. Duh.